Hi everyone, it's DoubleKayLife. I'm Karina.
I'm Kevin, and I don't know if many of you know this, but recently Karina and I moved out. I know. Hold your applause.
What?
And since then, we actually learned a lot of things that we wish we knew before we moved out. So to help you guys along with that process and any of you new couples that are about to move out, we're going to provide you guys 10 tips we wish we knew before we moved out.
So tip number 1, money talk. So before we moved out, Kevin especially helped us out because he's obsessed with Excel, so he made a bunch of Excel spreadsheets for different parts of the move-in. So we talked about how much money we wanted to spend on certain items. Like let's say, of course, how much money are you guys going to spend on rent? How much money are we going to spend on furniture? All the things that you buy when you move out, because you don't really realize how much you got to buy when you start from scratch moving from like your parents' house.
Another thing that was really big that we talked about is how are you guys going to split up the expenses of moving out?
Yeah, and I guess how you're going to pay each other through that. Like we do Zelle. Kevin showed me Zelle, which is, I think all banks have Zelle. I'm not really sure how that works, but that's how we do it. That's how we split all our expenses. And I think it's very important to establish that before you guys move out, so there's no surprises on, oh, I didn't expect to spend this much and the other person does.
One thing that there's also to consider is that when you guys set a budget, chances are you're going to blow over that budget. So don't save exactly for that budget. Try to give yourself a little bit of extra money, because there's things that you don't even realize you need until you're about to move out. Like there'd be times where like Karina comes home with like 75 cleaning products. I've never cleaned a house before, so I don't know anything about that. And I'm like, oh my God, I didn't account for, 6 million bottles of antibacterial spray.
Yeah. Also, spices. Because like you have nothing to cook with: olive oil, all those spices, but like it all adds up. And you really just need to account for all those things that you're going to be buying from scratch.
And the worst thing you guys are going to experience is that first grocery bill.
Oh yeah, that took us like 3 trips to the car?
3 trips to the car, and on top of that, we probably spent $300 to $400 on all those things that you are always in your fridge, but you never know how they quite got there. Ketchup, mustard, mayo, blah, 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 blah.
Tip number 2, what do you expect of each other? So like before we moved out, me and Kevin talked about what we expected us to do in terms of keeping the house running. So I am used to cleaning, so he already assumed that I was going to be doing all the cleaning, and I was okay taking on that task. Kevin is not used to doing many chores in his parents' house, so that was a little struggle for him, but we split up our tasks just to make sure that not one person was getting overwhelmed. Like for cooking, I think in the beginning, Kevin was still in college, so I was really taking that on every single night. But then once he finished school, we started dividing up cooking. And some days he only cooks so that I can get a break, and then I cook so that he can get a break. And it's really nice that way. I mean, it's just a whole learning experience when you guys start living together.
And it's something that definitely should be discussed beforehand, because if you both go into it expecting everybody to pick up everybody's slack, it's not going to happen. Someone's going to leave the garbage. It's going to get overflowing. Toilet might be really dirty.
Arguments are going to break out.
Yeah, and you want to try to avoid arguments as best as possible. Tip number 3, don't feel pressured into buying anything. Initially, what's going to happen is you're going to have this like thrill of excitement when you're moving out of, oh, I got to buy this. And what's going to happen is you might end up buying things that you don't necessarily want or need. So basically, the first thing I would say is take hand-me-downs. My parents gave me a bed set that we had in the house that I was currently using. Right there, that can save a lot of money. But 2, there were a lot of things that Karina and I bought, mostly my fault, because I'm kind of more anal about this stuff, where I kind of want to like get something done. I just want to have it done and not on my mind. So we went out and we bought side tables, we ended up buying stools, blah, blah, blah. And some of these things, when they came in, we were like, oh my God, this isn't really our style, or, oh, we bought this kind of cheap. We should have waited to find something a little bit better of a quality. So you really want to make sure, A, you're buying something that you really do like, but 2, make sure you're buying something that's going to last, because some things that we bought that we, thought would be cheaper, well, now they're not really good, and it's only been 6 months. You have to go and buy it again.
Right. And it's just also a hassle trying to return these items. Like, the one side table that we got was just really a hassle trying to return that back.
Tip number 4, take note of how they treat you. So one really big thing when we were looking at apartments was the communication. Now granted, when we were looking, it was in the middle of the pandemic. Made things a little bit harder. We started looking before the pandemic, kind of put a hold onto it because everyone was freaking out, and then we kind of went back to it. So this one particular apartment that we were looking at in a town near us, every time we went for the apartment tour, they didn't show up. So what ended up happening is that particular group of apartments, well, they own almost everything around here. So we ended up having to get an apartment with them in a different location. Long story short, I ended up becoming a Karen for a minute, and I pretty much went off on the guy for, mistreating us and everything like that. But what ended up happening too is now, taking note of how they treated us, that's how they're still treating us even though we're paying them rent, right? When we call for a maintenance problem, they don't show up. When we call for this, they don't answer. There's no drop-off box for rent. So it's a big thing, like the warning signs were all there when we were doing the tours. The problem is that sometimes you find a place that you like and there's nothing you can do. If you want it, sometimes you have to put up with that. That's your choice, but it's just something to keep note of that it could become a problem.
Tip number 5, don't get your hopes up. So there was a lot of apartments that we looked at, especially that I looked at online, and then like Kevin mentioned before, they wouldn't answer to get an apartment tour, so that would really bring me down. And then also when we got the apartment tour, it just really wasn't exactly what they pictured it online to be. And also make sure you read the contract fully, because you might find something in there that you really don't want to deal with. Like one of the apartments that we looked at, it was mandatory to pay a fee for the pool that they had and a gym. And we were like, well, what happens if we don't want to use the pool? You still had to pay those fees, which was kind of annoying, and that would have been a waste of money if Kevin and I went for that apartment. Especially with COVID, I'm sure they had those amenities closed, so I'm not really sure what they would have done with that. But just little details like that, you really got to look out for, and don't anticipate that that's going to be your apartment. Just to not get your hopes up and be disappointed, because I was disappointed a lot and it was really devastating. Tip number 6, take a couple days off to prepare for the move. So like Kevin and I took maybe 2 or 3 days. We really didn't need that much, which was kind of nice because we took the whole day off and we got a lot of shopping done in those days. But it's really nice not to have to worry about work, and then you have all day to go to the stores to shop for what you need. And it's very convenient to not have to deal with, I guess, the crowd if you were to go after work. It's just much easier to do these things on a day off.
You want to make sure that you're as least stressed as possible, because it is going to be a little bit stressful.
Right.
But we'll get to that a little bit later. But you just want to try to minimize the amount of stress that you're experiencing. So take a couple days off if you can afford to, and just do things at your own pace.
Tip number 7, remember to give each other space. So before we moved out, we also talked about setting kind of boundaries in terms of making sure that we give each other personal space. Like me personally, I had my own room. It was in the attic in my parents' house, and that was pretty much as private as it can get. And the fact that we are in a small apartment now is kind of hard to give each other personal space, but it's still very important to attempt it. And also Kevin to give each other personal space, because I think if we were together 24/7, we'd probably want to kill each other. And I guess the opposite of that would also be to say, also make sure you set time for each other. Like, maybe on a Friday night, have a little date night and just do things that you normally would when you guys weren't living together. Because I think couples, when they start living together, they forget to do cutesy things like that. And I just think it's really important to make sure you keep that going when you guys move out.
So Karina and I go on hikes, go on walks, and then after that, maybe we'll come home and I'll go play video games and she'll go off into the wander.
But you need that. You need that balance, or I think that just wouldn't work out.
Yeah, and if Karina had to watch a baseball game every night with me, she might jump. Tip number 8. So we kind of already touched on this a little bit, but I'm going to carry over because I feel like this tip kind of needs a more subsection part of it. Don't be cheap. So what I mean by that is there was, like I said before, there was a lot of things where we were like, I just need something. But then there's also situations where like, ooh, that's a lot of money to spend on that particular item. Like silverware, not silverware, like cutlery and stuff like that, like spoons, plastic spoons. So we would see like, okay, this is cool. There's a whole kit for $2. We're gonna buy this silverware kit. And then 2 days in, the spoon melts. Cooking eggs.
Yeah. No, wait, that was from TJ Maxx.
Yes, but it was cheap. That's the point.
Beware. Beware of TJ Maxx utensils.
Yeah, you're gonna see stuff that looks really great, like, oh, this price is too good to be true. It is too good to be true. Don't do it.
But don't hate on Target. We have a lot of items in our kitchen from Target, like our plates and our silverware, and they're pretty good.
If there's something you really, really want, now's the time. You don't have kids, you might have kids. Hopefully you move out before you have kids so you can enjoy it. But you have a little bit of money maybe, if you can afford, buy something for yourself a little bit. Like, there's a couple things where I'm staring at, you know, do I get the Black & Decker item or do I get the Breville item? And if it's something that you really are passionate about, don't be afraid to splurge on yourself and spoil yourself a little bit. You know, if there's something that's a little unnecessary but you really want, like chopsticks, you don't need chopsticks, you have forks and knives, but you wanted it. So don't be afraid to give yourself something you want either. That's another important thing. Tip number 9, keep safety in mind. So something that's really important when you're looking at apartments, if you can afford, again, a lot of this comes down to whether or not you can afford some of these things, but try to go for an area that you feel more comfortable in. Safety is important, right? Safety, when you think about it, is like, okay, A, does my building have good safety features? Is there cameras in the building? Is there keys to get into the building? What kind of keys? Are they easily hackable? How's the mailbox secured? If I'm in the building, how secure is it in the building? Right? Do I have to worry about my, you know, sketchy neighbor coming down the hallway and, you know, just coming in the door, like, what's up in here? Not just that, but wondering about the neighborhood. You know, if I come home late at night, is it safe for me to be walking back home? Like, in our area, it's really safe. Like, me and my friends, even just the other night, sat outside till like 2 in the morning just talking. Because it's like a safe neighborhood. I don't have to worry about anything. Not just that, but think about it from the perspective of your significant other.
So for me personally, I definitely had safety as one of my main priorities because, you know, like if I go to my mom's house and I drive back maybe at 10 o'clock, I don't want to have to worry how safe is it walking from my car to the building. It's just nice to have the freedom to know that you can go out and be safe.
So the next thing you're probably wondering is, well, how do I know that the area that I'm looking at is safe? Well, there's actually a couple tools you can use. First one you can use is kind of just your common sense when you're looking around the area. If you're driving through and you see cars on cinder blocks, it's probably not a great sign for the neighborhood. The other thing too is like, not just looking at that, but when you come into the building, you know, look around a little bit. Are there cameras? Do you see cameras? Does it look like, you know, the area you're in is a little sketchy and they have extra surveillance or something like that? Because that could be a bad sign too. Too many cameras might be indicative of a bad area. Another thing is online, right? We live in a world where there's so much access to information right at the tips of our fingers. So I can just go on Google and there's plenty of websites where you can say crime rate of town A, crime rate of town B. Just really use your tools and also use your common sense.
Tip number 10.
Tip number
Jen? Who is Jen?
It was at this moment that he knew. He up.
Tip number 10, remember to enjoy the process. So as we said before, moving out can be extremely stressful. The thing that's important is you really need to enjoy the process because there's only one time you move out for the first time. There's only one time you're gonna move out for the first time and move in with your significant other. So you wanna make sure that you're both enjoying it. Make sure you both kind of have each other's backs. You're like, I got your back. Make sure you got each other's backs and stuff like that.
Who said you could touch me?
Make sure you got each other's backs and make sure that, you know, everything is as fun as you can make it. One thing for me that was particularly stressful is I was really, really nervous to talk to my parents. And that was almost like to a degree, not like much, but there was a point where it was almost ruining the whole situation for me because I was like, oh my God, like
we're being very secretive about it. Like, we would go on tours and be like, oh, where were you? Oh, nothing, we were just, you know,
Looking
out to
around.
eat or looking around. Like, it's just not as fun having to hide those things from your parents, especially your parents.
I know. And one thing that's actually really interesting, so you guys out there know, when I actually did tell my parents, they were actually really excited. Which I was really surprised about. And that was something that, like, I wish I knew from the beginning, because I would have had them a little bit more involved in the whole process.
Yeah.
It would have been more enjoyable. And we ended up going shopping with them. Like, there was days where I went out with my mom and my grandma and Karina, and we would go shopping for the day. And it was honestly a good time. So you really want to make sure you enjoy the process. You only move out once.
So those were our 10 best tips for any of you new couples planning to move out for the first time. We wish you the best luck if you do move out. Just like we said, remember to enjoy it. You only do this once. Let us know down below if there's anything else you want to know. We'll be happy to help. Thank you for watching today's video. Please remember to subscribe and like the video, and we'll see you next time.